Hello and welcome to my video tutorial series over Introduction to Business. This content is going to focus on a couple important tasks. First, it's going to set the stage for the remainder of my videos in this video series, and why should you even study business? I will of course define business as a concept. Secondly, it's going to provide an overview of the economy, competition, and different types of economic systems here as you watch this video tutorial. These concepts are essentially going to be very basic for you in giving you a general understanding of the American economic system as a whole. Then I'm going to explore the major types of economic systems and then consider how a nation's economy and productivity are going to be measured. An examination of the major type of competitions are going to be looked at. So let's jump right on in. Our economy today continues to adapt and change to meet the challenges of an ever-changing world. Our economic system provides an amazing amount of freedom that allows our businesses that range in size from the small little individual entrepreneur to a major corporation to be able to adapt to a changing business environment within certain limits imposed mainly to ensure the public safety. The owners of a business can produce any legal good or service they choose and attempt to sell it at a price that they set. This system of business in which individuals decide what to produce, how they want to produce it, and at what price to sell it is called free enterprise. An example of this is how our free enterprise system ensures that a global business like Amazon.com can sell everything from televisions, toys, tools, to computers, to cameras, and even clothing. Another example is how our local farmers and local makers have the ability to be at a local farmer market and different trade shows to show, promote, and distribute their products and services. To experience success, you must adapt to change in order to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be out there for you. To do so, you must bring something to the table that makes you different from the next person or group. You need to ask yourself, what can I do that will make employers want to pay me a salary? And what skills do I have that employers need? Well, that should lead you to understanding of why should I study business? As I've told people for years, once you have an education and knowledge, no one can ever take that away from you. I'm going to provide you, here in a second, a visual reason to help show you why it's important to study business. And this reason is really going to focus on the economic business, or the economic benefits. As you can see here, and this information is from the U.S. Census Bureau, as the economic benefits of an education. So this kind of shows us, okay, if we just complete high school, an average would be in our life we'd expect to make $57,000. But the higher our level of education goes, the more knowledge that we get, that number goes up exponentially. But that's not the only reason that we should study business. I'm going to discuss 5 other reasons why you as an individual should study business. And the first of those is in helping choose a career. This information that in these video tutorials I'm giving you will introduce you to a wide array of employment opportunities. One thing to remember as you think about what your ideal career might be is that a person's choice of a career is ultimately a reflection of what they value and what you hold most important. Another reason is to be a successful employee. To get a job in your chosen field and be successful at it, you will have to develop a plan, or think of it as a roadmap, that ensures that you have the skills and the knowledge that that job requires. Now, I can provide you some information, but you also need to think about that life experiences are going to contribute to this as well. And all the resources available at taking classes and getting those life skills, those are needed for you to have a successful career. It's a combination of all of that. Another reason is to improve your management skills. Now, to be an effective manager, you must be able to perform 4 basic management functions. And you will hear these from not only me, but other like business courses that you might take, or even training in an organization that you work. But the 4 basic management functions are planning, organizing, leading and motivating, and then controlling. So planning, organizing, leading and motivating is your 3rd management function, and then controlling is that 4th management function. To successfully perform these management functions, managers must possess 4 very important skills: interpersonal skills, analytic skills, technical skills, of course, and conceptual skills. Another reason why we study business is in case you're wanting to be an entrepreneur and start your own business. Some people prefer to work for themselves, and so they do what it takes to open their own business. To be successful, business owners must possess many of these same skills that successful employees have. It also helps if you have a small business, or if your small business can provide a product or some type of service that customers want and that no one else in your area is providing, or that there is very little competition that you're going to face when you enter into the market. Unfortunately, approximately 70% of small businesses fail within the first 10 years. Typical reasons for these small business failures are going to be including failures to include undercapitalization, poor business location, this happens a lot, poor customer service, and I'm sure most of you can come up with some quick examples, or you can talk to family and friends that can come up with examples of poor customer service that they've experienced. Another reason is for unqualified or untrained employees. Another reason for business failures could be fraud, lack of a proper business plan, which is essential, and I'll talk about that in another video, and failure to seek outside professional help when you should. So think about these things, especially if you have that entrepreneurial mind and you're thinking about having your own business. And the last reason I'll share with you about why to study business is to become a better informed consumer and an investor. By studying the business concepts, you will become more fully informed as a consumer, which means that you will be able to make more intelligent buying decisions and spending your money much wiser when you're making purchases. The same basic understanding of business will also make you a better informed investor to take your money and invest. I said I would share with you a definition of what business is. Well, business is that organized effort of individuals to produce and sell for a profit the goods and services that satisfies society's needs. If there's not a need for a product or service, no one's going to buy it or use it. Therefore, you're not going to be able to sell it and definitely not going to be able to make a profit. So based on that definition, there are 3 components of this definition of business. First, it must be organized. And I'm sure there are other things in your life you see, oh, I wish that was more organized. Or you've come across something that if it had been more organized, it would have been more successful. The second component is that it must satisfy a need. So if we don't have that need, if there's not that need, what's the point of having it? And then lastly, and you're probably thinking this is obviously most important, especially for your business to continue to grow and actually exist, is that it must earn a profit. If you're not earning profit, you're not able to make new developments, you're not able to grow, you're not able to stay alive. Your business could fail to exist. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the organized effort of individuals. Today, businesses are usually going to be organized into a few different manners, but we must combine 4 different resources to be successful. You can see those are here. We have the 4 resources for any business. We have our human resources, our material resources, our informational resources, and our financial resources. What are these resources that I need, or any business needs, to combine to be successful? Well, the material resources, these are those raw materials that we use in manufacturing, and this can also include our buildings and our machinery. Now, the human resources, as you'd expect, this is the people who furnish the business labor in return for wages. With financial resources, this is the money that's required to pay employees, purchase of your materials, and generally keep your business operating and in existence. Now, informational resources, this is information that tells us as managers of the business how effectively the other three resources are being combined and used, and therefore we can measure our success. Typically, we see that businesses are organized as one of three different specific types. That first type is going to be that of a service business. An example of this would be like H&R Block, Bo Ricks, who cuts hairs, and True Green, who's going to do landscaping and lawn maintenance. They're providing a service. They're not actually giving you a product. They're providing you a service. It's not something tangible. They're providing some act that you need performed that you have a need of. The other one is going to be the manufacturing businesses. These process various materials into those tangible goods that we purchase that we can use, we can touch. An example of this is Intel, making processors that go into our computers that we use, or Ford Motors, making vehicles that we buy, something tangible, and they get these various materials, they put into a process, they make us a vehicle, and we purchase that vehicle. Or Blue Buffalo, making those animal products we need for our animals. And then thirdly, we are looking at marketing intermediaries. And these intermediaries are going to buy products from manufacturers and then are going to resell them to us, such as Sony Corporation as an example, who buys components from different manufacturers, like, to put a TV together, and then they give that to us, or they sell it to us. Or Amazon. Amazon is going to be an intermediary between you and a business directly. You're going to buy the product from Amazon because they buy in bulk or they have good business agreements. We actually sometimes will get it less from them than we would directly from the manufacturer. So those are the three specific types. Now let's talk about e-business. And this term has been used for several years. Some people still haven't jumped into it. Some businesses still haven't gotten into it. But an e-business is an organized effort of individuals to produce and sell for profit. This should sound familiar. It's just like the definition that I just gave you about business. But the organized effort of individuals to produce and sell for a profit the goods and services that satisfies needs through the facilities available on the internet. Some people simply refer to this as online business. Some examples of this would be Priceline and Expedia. We can access these businesses through the internet to get us those services or goods we need. We want to get some travel taken care of. We use one of these to do that for us. So we're performing our business through the internet. That's why we call it e-business or online business. Now, I talked about profit. Here's a definition of what profit is. This is what remains after all of our business expenses have been deducted or taken away from our sales revenue. You see, I've got this diagram up here. Our sales revenue, let's say what we made. We're just going to do this on a very general level. Then we take away what we've put into the business, what we have to pay out, that's our expenses, and whatever is left of that, that's our profit. A negative profit results when a firm's expenses are greater than its sales revenue. Typically, we just call this a loss or a business loss. We want to not have that. We obviously want to make money, so we need to make a profit. I feel it's important now to talk about stakeholders. This term, stakeholders, is used to describe all the different people or groups who are affected by an organization's policies, their decisions, and their activities. While stockholders and business owners generally believe that profit is the most important goal for a business, many stakeholders may be just as concerned about a firm's social responsibility record. So don't get the terms stockholders and stakeholders mixed up when you hear those terms in business. I mentioned profit, and the profit earned by a business becomes the property of its owners. Profit is the reward business owners receive for producing goods and services that consumers want and for assuming the risks of ownership. One of these is the risk of not being paid. As an owner of a business, before you can be paid, you need to make sure that your employees, your suppliers, and any lenders are paid first. Now, another of these risks is a risk of losing whatever was invested in the business. As owners, we assume that risk. The reward is hopefully we're going to make profit. Apple Incorporated has been monumentally successful with its iPhone products. Think about what needs you think the iPhone meets, especially here in the 21st century. Now, prior to 2006 or 7, we didn't really think of it as much, but with iPhones and smartphones, we know how important they are. You could probably think of some other recent products or even services that meet an existing need that maybe wasn't there when you were younger. Well, now let's move into talking about economics. Economics is the study of how wealth is created and how that wealth is distributed. Now, by wealth, I mean anything that has some value. Now, how wealth is distributed, this simply means who gets what. The way in which people deal with these two issues determine the type or kind of economic system or an economy that a particular nation has. Economics is usually studied from two different perspectives. Those perspectives are microeconomics, which is the study of decisions that are made by individuals and businesses. And then macroeconomics, just like you would think, it's a much larger scale. Macroeconomics is the study of the national economy as well as the global economy. Now, when we talk about these, there's another area we need to definitely talk about here in this video that have to do with this value and this wealth and in terms of business. And that just naturally leads to the discussion of the 4 factors of production. These are used to produce things in our society. And we'll talk about land first. Land and our natural resources. These are elements in their natural state that can be used in the production, such as like with crude oil, or getting trees from the forest, or minerals, water, and even air is a land or natural resource. This is a factor of production that gets used. And some of those things that we use these type of factors in is like the producing of appliances or automobiles or even other products. Another important factor of production is that of labor. Just like it sounds, you already know these are those human resources such as the managers and employees and the time and effort used to produce goods and services in our production. Capital, well, that's the money and facilities and equipment and machines that are used in the operations within our organizations. An example of this would be manufacturing equipment at a production facility such as in the automotive industry. And then entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the willingness to take risks and the knowledge and ability to use other factors of production and using those efficiently. You have to have the idea for the company and or product. An entrepreneur, well, this is a person who risks that time and that effort and their money to start and operate a business and using these factors of production. Let's talk about economic systems. An economic system is a mechanism used by a society to best allocate its scarce resources. A nation's economic system significantly affects all the economic activities of its citizens and its organizations within that nation. A country's economic system provides answers to 4 basic economic questions. The first of those questions are, what goods and services and how much of each should be produced? The second basic economic question is, how will these goods and services be produced? The third economic question, for whom will these goods and services be produced for? And then lastly, the 4th basic economic question is, who owns and controls the major factors of production? The society best answers the questions based on its social values and goals of that society. Let's talk about one, that's capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system in which individuals own and operate the majority of businesses that provide those goods and services. Capitalism stems from the theories of the 18th century Scottish economics, Adam Smith. And you can do some research on Adam Smith, and you may sometimes hear him called the godfather or grandfather, or even just the father of economics. But as the father of economics, and as a moral philosopher, he came up with this term called the invisible hand. And this invisible hand term, created by Adam Smith, describes how an individual's personal gain benefits from others and a nation's economy. It essentially describes the unintended social benefits of an individual's self-interest actions. If something goes wrong, natural market forces that allow the market to control itself because there are no government control. Consumers, we are going to govern what is needed and at what cost that we are willing to spend. Another term that comes up a lot in business is laissez-faire. This describes Adam Smith's capitalistic system and implies that there should be no government interference in the economy. Laissez-faire capitalism is also based on the concept of a market economy. Now, this term you will come across lots. This is where economies should operate based on competition and consumer pricing. We also call market economy the free market economy. As I said, this is an economic system in which businesses and individuals are going to decide what to produce and what to buy. And the market itself is going to determine the quantities that are needed and sold, as well as the prices consumers are going to pay. An example is that, let's just say Ford Motor Company must decide what type of automobiles it will sell. They're also going to determine how the automobiles are going to be produced and for whom the automobiles will be produced. Now, you as a consumer, you must decide if you will buy a Ford product or if you will produce or provide yourself with a product from some other automobile manufacturer. In 2019, Ford decided to not offer as many small cars in 2020. In December 2011, the final Ford Ranger was produced for North America, and it rolled off the assembly line. But they were still being produced for outside of the U.S. Well, that was in 2011. The American economy said, hey, we want to be able to buy Ford Rangers. So the Rangers production came back to the U.S. all year 2019. So they went 8 years without providing a product that its consumers wanted to buy. Now let's move on to talk about socialism. Now, a command economy, which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community or the government as a whole. This is also known as a centrally command economy. And you can do some research to look up Karl Marx and socialism or Karl Marx and command economy to find out more. But Karl Marx is tied to this type of economy. With command economy, this is an economic system in which the government decides everything. They'll decide what will be produced, how it will be produced, and for whom the available goods and services will be produced for, as well as who owns and controls the major factors of production. There are two types of those command economies. And the first one, of course, is socialism, and then the second one is communism. As I said, socialism, the key industries are owned and controlled by the government. In communism, and in this type of communist economy, almost all economic resources are owned by the government. Emphasis is going to be placed on the production of goods that the government needs rather than on the products that the consumers need. As I said, Karl Marx is known as the father of communism. And then we have what's called a mixed economy. And this is an economy that exhibits elements of both capitalism and of socialism. Essentially, the free market. This is also known as the private sector, and the government, known as the public sector, work together in order to meet the public's needs. Here in the U.S. economy is basically a mixed economy. And in a mixed economy, The four basic economic questions, what, how, for whom, and who, are all going to be answered through the interactions of households, such as with our consumer products, those goods and services that are purchased by individuals for personal consumptions. And the businesses are going to be engaged in two different exchanges. They exchange money for natural resources, their labor, their capital, and they use these resources to produce goods and services. Then they exchange their goods and services for sales revenue. And then when it comes to the government is going to provide a variety of services that are considered important, but either they would not be produced by private business firms or would be produced only for those who could afford them. Now let's talk about how we measure our economic performance. This is where we talk about the GDP, or the gross domestic product. The GDP is the market value of all of our finished goods and services produced within a country in a year. I say the term finished good. A finished good is the final product that will not be reused or resold. So when you buy a cake, your ingredients are the intermediate goods and your cake is the finished good. You don't count the value of your intermediate goods. To the supermarket where you bought the ingredients, they were considered finished goods to them after you bought them. And then the cake is the finished good after you use those intermediate goods. So make sure you understand how those terms exist and understand what the gross domestic product is. You will hear this term used in the media quite often. Now, the GDP is not our only way of measuring our nation's economic performance. Let's take a look at a few others here. And as I said, we will use these to evaluate our nation's economy as well. And first of those is the unemployment rate. This is that percentage of our nation's labor force that's unemployed at any given time. This is that number of people without compared to the total labor force that exists. Then we have the Consumer Price Index. This is a monthly index that's going to measure the changes in prices of a fixed basket of goods that are purchased by a typical consumer in an urban area. And we're looking at, are prices going up or down? Are we seeing inflation or deflation? And then the last is the Producer Price Index, or the PPI. And the PPI is an index that measures prices that producers receive for their finished goods and services. So these are some very important terms. You may want to do some further research on so that you're very comfortable with those terms. But I just want to give you a basic definition of those, kind of a very general understanding of some of those important economic indicators that we use for measuring our economic performance. Another very important thing in business terms is to talk about the business cycle. A nation's economy is going to fluctuate rather than grow at a steady pace every year. These fluctuations that you see here on this chart are generally referred to as the business cycle. And that is the reoccurrence of periods of growth and recession in a nation's economic activity. This is all based on time and the level of real output, or our gross domestic product. Generally here, our business cycle is going to consist of 4 different stages. We're going to see a peak. This is our prosperity. We're going to see a recession. We're going to see our trough. And then we're going to see our recovery period, or our expansion period. During our peak period, the economy is at its highest point, unemployment is going to be low, and total income is relatively high, and our consumers are willing to buy products and services. During this time, businesses often expand and offer new products and services. Now, we also see we have a recession. And the recession is 2 or more consecutive 3-month periods of decline in a country's gross domestic product. Here we're going to see unemployment is going to rise and total buying power is going to decline because people aren't going to have as much money to spend on things, especially if they're unemployed. Now, if we look at the trough here, this is the trough of a recession or a depression, is the phase in which the nation's output and the employment reach their lowest levels. and then you see the recovery period. This is the movement of the economy from depression or recession. Here we're going to see a greater demand for products and services. As things are coming up, people are going to be buying more. Now, in business, we have some basics we need to understand. That's the basics of supply and demand. The supply of a particular product is the quantity of the product that producers are willing to sell at each of its various prices. Now, the demand for a particular product or service is the quantity that buyers are willing to purchase at each of the various prices. Then we have the equilibrium, or the market price. The market price is the price at which the quantity demanded is exactly equal to the quantity supplied. You can think here, when have you purchased a product and do you typically see that you face competition in the market? So if you're an entrepreneur, you need to think about this, because typically when you have a product, you're going to face competition. If you're the first to get into the market, there's going to be low or no competition. And then you as a business have to figure out how much demand is there going to be for your product, how much can you supply, and are you willing to supply at different prices. So supply and demand are really the fundamentals of business, and especially with entrepreneurships. Now let's talk about competition. I've mentioned it that when you go into a market, others are going to offer similar products and services. So there's that game of how much to offer at what prices. Well, we need to know what type of competitions are out there. Competition really just, by definition, is a rivalry among businesses for sales to potential customers. Now, economists recognize 4 different degrees of competition. First of all, we have the perfect competition, and this is a market situation in which there are many buyers and many sellers of a product or service, and no single buyer or seller is powerful enough to affect the price of that product or service. In perfect competition, buyers and sellers must accept the going price. Obviously, perfect competition is quite rare in today's world. Then we have monopolistic competition. And this is a market situation in which there are many buyers along with a relatively large number of sellers attempting to make its products different. We can see this in like clothing and shoes, especially in buying of the shoe market. Now, in oligopoly, this is a market situation in which there are few sellers. These sellers are quite large and must make sizable investments to enter into those given markets. Because there are few sellers, the market actions of each can have a strong effect on the competitors' sales and their prices. And we see this in the automobile industry. There aren't a whole lot of businesses that are producing cars. We know there are a lot of cars and different types of cars, but actual number of manufacturers is actually relatively small. And then the last type of competition that economists recognize is a monopoly. Now, this is a marketer industry situation with only one seller. A firm in a monopoly position must consider the demand for its product and set that price at the most profitable level because there's a lack of other producers or competitors. We see this a lot with public utilities, where you only have one supplier for the water to your house or the electricity. These are prime examples of monopolies. You can probably find some others, but just knowing the different types of competition out there or competitors are out there is great business knowledge to have. Now, here we focused on very basics of business and of world economy. So this is just an introduction to these concepts. I hope you will go out and do some more research and gain more knowledge. And I hope you found the information in this video helpful and that you will enjoy following videos. Thanks for watching and welcome to an introduction to business.